Votes are in. It looks like an overwhelming majority of voters have said that the Powerpuff Girls should trust Mr. House and help him establish the free economic zone of New Vegas to ensure the city's independence from NCR and Caesar's Legion. So, that's what we're going to have them do in Part 2. After talking to Mr. House about the next step in this plan being to go to the fort and open a bunker there with a platinum chip, Professor Utonium and the girls go to the presidential suite in the Lucky 38 to talk about Mr. House and his Securitrons. The professor was a bit hesitant to help Mr. House when he saw the power of the robots when they were upgraded, but the Powerpuff Girls do believe that Mr. House's intentions are honest. He has been protecting Vegas for over 200 years at this point, even at the risk of his own life, according to what he told them regarding what happened when the atomic bombs fell. Mr. House also made it clear he doesn't want to fight a war with NCR. He welcomes citizens and even soldiers of the NCR to the Strip as patrons. He just doesn't want the NCR's government to take New Vegas away from him, and many of the locals, both on and off the Strip, have said the same thing. The girls would certainly fight anyone who tried to take them away from the professor, after all. Trusting the girls' intuition, Professor Utonium agrees with them to aid Mr. House, and the family heads toward Cottonwood Cove. The Powerpuff Girls have no trouble clearing the road of feral ghouls as they make the trip, though the professor and the girls get a good look at how bad the Legion really is as they approach Cottonwood Cove. People have been crucified and left for dead, their heads mounted on pikes decorating the road, and people are locked in cages to be enslaved. One legionary approaches the professor and orders him to state his business, but backs down when the professor shows him the mark of Caesar. The professor is a bit worried when, after taking the boat to the fort with Cursu and Cullis, that both the platinum chip is taken from him and the girls aren't with him. Did the Legion force them to stay behind? That worry ends when the girls fly in and catch up with the professor as he makes his way into Caesar's tent. It takes a stern reminder from the professor that Mr. House told them not to attack the fort while they're here, after learning from the slave named Siri how the Legion treats women to prevent the Powerpuff Girls from tearing the place apart.
We're property. If you're too young or too old, the men usually leave you alone. Usually.
Something the professor ends up having to remind himself when he discovers the Legion have enslaved a little girl no older than Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup. Melody asks the professor if he could get her teddy bear back from Antony, the Legion's dog handler. The professor speaks to Antony on Melody's behalf, and Antony gives the bear to the professor when it becomes obvious his dogs will not attack Professor Utonium. While rescuing Melody from the Legion would be preferable, returning Sergeant Teddy will have to do for now. The guard in front of the tent tells the professor he must enter alone, but Blossom and Buttercup defy the guard and go in with the professor anyway, while Bubbles stays outside. Caesar tells Professor Utonium that he wants whatever Mr. House has stashed away in the bunker destroyed. The professor reminds Caesar that the guards already took the platinum chip away from him at the gate, and any one of them could have used it to open the bunker and do this, but Caesar insists that he wants the professor to do it for him, giving him back the platinum chip to do so. Inside the bunker, Professor Utonium talks to Mr. House, who tells them there is an army of hundreds of Securitrons inside this bunker, and that the platinum chip will upgrade all of them. Having seen the Legion's atrocities firsthand, the professor agrees to upgrade the Securitrons. The security in the bunker has gone haywire, but the professor is able to program the Protectrons and turrets to return to standby mode, although he does set them to go into alert mode if they see anyone wearing red sports equipment come into the bunker, just in case. Upgrading the Securitrons with the platinum chip is a simple matter after this. The background radiation inside the bunker may not have any effect on the Powerpuff Girls, but I have the professor take a dose of Radaway before leaving. While trying to think of something to tell Caesar, it turns out he doesn't have to say anything. The ground shook when the platinum chip activated the Securitrons, and Caesar assumes this was the professor destroying what was in there as commanded. He next tells the professor to return to the Lucky 38 and eliminate Mr. House, telling him only to return once Mr. House is gone. While I doubt the Legion could have stopped the Powerpuff Girls and the professor from escaping the fort, it looks like they aren't even gonna try. Mr. House is happy the Securitrons are ready, but Mr. House wanted the Professor and the Powerpuff Girls' help dealing with some groups that may cause trouble before the second battle for Hoover Dam begins. The first group is known as the Boomers, who live in seclusion in the north at the Nellis Air Force Base. On the way to Nellis, the Powerpuff Girls save the Earth by stopping an alien invasion. A man named George tells the Professor that the area up ahead is the killing field where the Boomers fire howitzers at anyone approaching the Nellis Air Force Base. He wagers with the Professor and gives him a note, giving him the plan on how to cross, but Blossom comes up with a plan of her own. Blossom's plan involves drawing the howitzer fire to themselves while the Professor runs straight to the front gate. The plan works like a charm, even if the girls get a little banged up by the artillery barrage. The Professor and the girls are brought to see Pearl, one of the Boomers' elders. She tells the Professor there's all kinds of ways he can help them, and the Professor agrees to help them out. After finding Mr. Cuddles, Professor talks to Loyal, who asks if he can fix their solar arrays, and Jack, who wants to meet a girl he has a crush on from the Crimson Caravan. The Professor collects the last of the snow globes for Mr. House while taking Pete's tour, returns Mr. Cuddles to Lindsay, and heals Dr. Argyle's patients.
Those men owe you their lives.
Buttercup asks the Professor if there's anything the girls can do to help the Boomers, so he talks to Raquel, who says there are some giant ants who overran the generator room and cut off the power. She would be grateful to the girls if they could clear out the ants and turn the power back on. She mentions Loyal may have a weapon they can use to help them, so the Professor talks shop with Loyal to get the sonic emitter. After repairing the solar arrays, the Professor heads into the generator room, where Bubbles uses the giant ant line correctly in combat.
Time for the giant ant.
The girls clear the way to the nest, allowing the Professor to set the sonic emitter and turn it on, clearing the remaining ants before turning the power back on. Then they head to the Crimson Caravan to find Janet, the girl Jack likes, and finds out that she likes him back. After some back and forth, Janet heads to Nellis to be with Jack. Before catching up with the new couple, Professor Utonium returns to George to collect his winnings for surviving the Boomers' howitzers, then returns to Nellis to see them together.
Hi there. It's great to meet you as well.
I'm glad you made it out here. You're even more stunning up close than you were at a distance.
And you're even more handsome up close. Do you think it'll be okay if I hang around here for a little while, so we can get to know each other better?
Of course it would. I'll have you set up with some quarters with some of the other women. Thank you for getting Janet to Nellis. I've never been so happy in my entire life.
The Boomers have one more thing for the Professor and the girls to do for them, and that is to raise a bomber from the bottom of Lake Mead. A grateful Jack is happy to make the Professor a rebreather so that he can dive underwater and not drown. With the rebreather at the ready, the Professor dives down to where the bomber is, attaches the ballasts, and uses Loyal's detonator to raise the bomber. The grateful Boomers are more than happy to join the second battle for Hoover Dam on the Professor's side after all they've done for him. Although Bubbles seems a little disappointed. The only cute blonde Boomer at Nellis wasn't the one she was looking for. With the Boomers on side, Mr. House tells the Professor he's concerned about co-conspirators on the Strip. The chairman may have returned to business as usual now that Benny has been taken care of, but he is concerned about the other two families, particularly the Omertas. He is certain they are up to something and asks the Professor to find out what it is and to have the girls put a stop to it if they are plotting against him. The Snow Globe collection is complete, but the NCR and Caesar's Legion are now well aware that the Powerpuff Girls are helping Mr. House. The Gomorrah is where we run into a problem. Remember how I said the Professor is not allowed to attack anyone or steal anything? That comes into play here with Caccino. I need his journal to progress the quest How Little We Know, but there are only two ways to get it. The first is to buy the key to Caccino's room from the receptionist and find the journal in a desk, but taking it incurs a loss of karma, as this counts as stealing it. The other method is to pickpocket it off of Caccino, which paradoxically doesn't incur a karma loss despite stealing it directly from his person. There does exist a third option, refusing to hand over the weapons the professor doesn't have and turning the Omertas hostile, thus allowing the Powerpuff Girls to clear out the casino, but that method won't make Mr. House very happy. I'm supposed to investigate the Omertas, not slaughter them. Since their game for some reason doesn't count pickpocketing it from Caccino as a theft, I decide to go this route. After convincing Caccino to help him stop the boss's plans, the professor heads to Clandon's room, only for me to realize there's no way to deal with him as I cannot open the safe and take the snuff tapes, so I instead have the professor talk to Troik and agree to get him out of his contract. After convincing Big Sal to release Troik, I have him give the thermite to the professor so he can destroy the guns. I take care not to set off the thermite with any of the girls in the room, although I probably should have closed the door first. Whoops. At least nobody got hurt. Caccino tells the professor the next step is to take out Big Sal and Nero, giving the professor a shotgun he can't use. Since I put most of my skill points into science instead of speech, I'm unable to turn the bosses against each other, but it hardly matters in the end. I don't even bother to stand back up as the Powerpuff Girls take down Big Sal and Nero from right outside the office. Next, the professor heads into the Ultralux, where he meets a rancher named Heck Gunderson. Heck asks the Powerpuff Girls to help him find his missing son, Ted. Since this is supposed to be a high-class place, the girls' usual spread and search method would likely be frowned on, so instead the professor decides to talk to Marjorie about anyone having gone missing. Marjorie lets slip that a young woman disappeared before Heck's son, and that the White Glove Society is a rehabilitated cannibal tribe. The professor asks Mr. House if he knew about this, and Mr. House assures the professor that the White Glove Society is contractually obligated to refrain from practicing cannibalism. Although hearing House forbids it is reassuring, the professor decides to continue the investigation in the hopes of finding Ted Gunderson. Marjorie tells the professor she hired a private investigator to look into the disappearance of the young woman and had Mortimer give him a free room for as long as his investigation takes. Mortimer gives the professor a key to the investigator's room, but upon entering finds the investigator has been killed, and the girls easily fend off two of the white gloves who were lying in wait to ambush them. On the body of the investigator is a matchbook, which says to go to the steam room at 4 p.m., so the professor goes there in his stead. There he meets Chauncey, who tells the professor that Mortimer is the one responsible for the disappearances, and that he's trying to convince the White Glove Society to return to their cannibalistic ways by serving a fancy dinner cooked from human flesh. Unfortunately, an assassin kills Chauncey before he can be of any more help, and before the girls can defeat the assassin. With Chauncey dead, the professor asks Marjorie if she would be willing to sponsor him to join the White Glove Society as an honorary member, and she agrees to, given all the good he and the Powerpuff Girls have done for the strip already. This gets the professor the key to the members-only section, and no one bats an eye at his or the Powerpuff Girls' presence there. A white glove guarding the kitchen asks the professor why he's here. The professor convinces him he's here to move Ted on Mortimer's behalf, and the guard buys it. After playing therapist with Philippe, he tells the professor to cook the banquet for him and runs off. The professor cooks a recipe called sweet veal that claims to make Brahmin meat taste like human flesh, rescues Ted from the freezer, then calls the waiter at 7 p.m. and tells him to serve the meal. Using a stealth boy, the professor leads Ted and the Powerpuff Girls to the banquet, revealing to the White Glove Society that Mortimer's plan to serve human meat has failed, and the maitre d' runs off in disgrace. Dinner is saved, thanks to the Powerpuff Girls. After returning Ted to his father and smoothing things over, the professor lets Mr. House know that all is well on the strip, and Mr. House tells the professor the next step is to eliminate the Brotherhood of Steel, a fanatical organization that covets pre-war weapons and despises post-war progress and mutation. The Brotherhood is certain to directly oppose Mr. House's Securitrons and the professor's Powerpuff Girls. The professor agrees to eliminate the Brotherhood of Steel, then fails a dozen quests since at this point in the House quest chain I have been cut off from siding with the NCR or Caesar's Legion. The Legion will now be hostile, but that just means it's now open season on them. The Before heading to Hidden Valley, the girls do some superhero training and preparation. Enjoy this montage of the Powerpuff Girls taking on the Deathclaws at Quarry Junction, the leaders of the Fiends, and every legendary creature in the Mojave Wasteland.
Time for the tornado! Attack! Blossoms and charge! Full starboard, stand down! Somebody bring me a barf bag. Powerpuff bubble attack! We are number one! Flying bubble! Time for the tornado! Why did you take us? Why did you take us? Yes, for the weak! I'm gonna stop Mojo's silly plot! Powerpuff Starburst! Yeah! Chicka-yaka! Take that, giant ant! That's no fun. Why did you take us? Blossoms and charge! Flying bubble!
Thanks for the help.
You take care of me. You don't look that tough enough. Cool. I haven't had a good fight in a while. It's been ages since Donnie and Marie had something they could sink their teeth into.
You ready to die?
Time for that toe!
girls clear out the bark scorpions on the way to Hidden Valley, where a barrage of laser fire suddenly attacks the professor from the cover of the sandstorm. Just as Mr. House said, the Brotherhood of Steel was hostile to the professor and the Powerpuff Girls, who were at that moment being distracted by a bark scorpion up on a ridge they couldn't shoot to follow the professor into Hidden Valley. So I had to have the professor lead them to where the girls were and take cover behind some rocks, resulting in a shootout with a broken fence between them. Inside the hidden bunker, the Brotherhood orders the professor to stand down and allow them to take him into custody. They don't tell him what they plan to do to the girls, but he already has a good idea of what their intentions are and refuses, taking cover behind some metal crates as the great battle between the Brotherhood of Steel and the Sisterhood of Powerpuff begins. After the girls take down Paladin Ramos and anyone else from the Brotherhood that rushes at the front entrance to shoot at them, the professor reprogrammed the laser turrets downstairs to fight on their side instead of the Brotherhood's. The Powerpuff Girls and the laser turrets work together to wipe out the Brotherhood of Steel, while the professor collects the 3 key cards needed to activate the bunker's self-destruct sequence. The professor makes sure to do a head count so that none of the Powerpuff Girls are left behind as they evacuate the bunker before it explodes, finishing off the Brotherhood of Steel. Professor Utonium and Robert House would have high-fived at this point if they could, but since they can't, Mr. House tells him it's important that the Powerpuff Girls protect NCR President Aaron Kimble as he gives a speech at Hoover Dam. If the Legion assassinate him, the NCR won't blame Kimble's over-ambition for the NCR's failure to annex the Strip. They'll blame Mr. House himself, and this would be the start of a war Mr. House doesn't want with NCR. Fortunately, the Professor and the Powerpuff Girls are trusted by NCR enough to allow them to assist in defending President Kimble. It pays off for NCR when the Professor disarms a bomb that was planted on the President's vertibird, and the girls take out a Legion sniper disguised as a ranger. President Kimble gives a medal to Private Watson, finishes his speech, and leaves without anything bad happening.
There's nothing down here.
With a second battle for Hoover Dam imminent, Mr. House has one final task for Professor Utonium. He needs to install an override module to a terminal guarded by the NCR at the El Dorado Electric Substation. This will jumpstart the Lucky 38's reactor in preparation for powering on the Securitron army back at the fort. A stealth boy allows the professor to do this without starting a fight with the NCR soldiers guarding the building. With everything prepared, Mr. House sends Professor Utonium and the Powerpuff Girls back to Hoover Dam, where the second battle for Hoover Dam between the NCR and Caesar's Legion has already begun. The Powerpuff Girls and House's Securitrons clear the dam of Legion forces so that the professor can reach the dam's control room and install another override chip. This gives Mr. House full access to Hoover Dam's electrical output, and with a flick of a switch, the lights come on and the Securitrons at the fort bunker activate and crush the Legion in their own base. All that remains now is to deal with Legate Linnaeus and General Oliver. The Powerpuff Girls and the Securitrons fight alongside NCR's forces to clear a path to the Legate's camp, although there is one casualty. The Mark II Securitron that accompanied the Professor to the dam's control room goes down in a hail of Legion gunfire. Rust in peace, my friend. Still, there's no time to grieve for the fallen, as the Securitrons clear the path to the Legate's camp. The Professor and the Powerpuff Girls head into the camp, but for some reason the girls aren't going into the camp. Turns out they were distracted by a single legionary who was taking potshots at them from a sniper's nest. Eventually the girls take him down and follow the Professor to where Legate Linnaeus waits. The Legate draws his sword and dashes right past the Powerpuff Girls to try and attack the Professor. His misogyny proves to be his undoing, however, as the girls defeat him and the rest of the Legion, even as the Legion ignores their presence and tries to attack Professor Utonium, thinking the unarmed scientist is somehow the greater threat compared to the 3 little girls with ultra superpowers. With the Legion vested, Professor Utonium talks to General Oliver, presents him with the order of withdrawal, points out to him that brains have overcome brawn this day, and I beat Fallout New Vegas, thanks to the Powerpuff Girls.